Good morning, everyone, and a warm, hopefully warm welcome to the University of Leeds, and particularly on behalf of the Leeds University Business School. And thank you so much for making it through the snow. Yes, I'm Professor Lisa Roberts. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation at the University. And I'm delighted to have been asked to welcome you to the Festival of Ideas, and specifically the plenary session this morning, Defining the City of the Future. So this morning obviously commences the daytime schedule for the festival, an event which is going to showcase the breadth and the quality of business school research, encouraging academic collaboration and connecting researchers, city leaders and industry experts. And for those staying for the full programme, following this plenary, I know that there's a number of parallel sessions going to be running over in University House. And these include presentations and discussions around some pretty important topics: corporate social responsibility, emerging markets, technology and innovation, and entrepreneurship. And the day will then draw to a close with a session back in here in the Great Hall, looking at how we can build sustainable supply chains. So the aim of this festival, and the reason I'm really happy to be here, is that it fits perfectly with our university research and innovation strategy. So our overall strategy for research is about increasing the volume of our research, the quality of our research, and the impact of our research. And clearly we're already doing pretty well at this. We're already 10th in the UK for research power and top 10 for the impact of our research. And one of the major strengths that we have at Leeds is our ability to work across disciplines, to answer some big, meaty research questions. And the breadth, but also the depth of the quality of our research means that we do this really well. So to facilitate and encourage and support this interdisciplinary working to solve such complex problems, whether they be local to Leeds or whether they be global problems, we have 6 grand challenge research themes in the university that bring together academics from across different disciplines to tackle difficult questions that really need different perspectives across science, engineering, business, social science, arts. Questions such as how we ensure a safe and sustainable food supply chain across the world, how we create safe, healthy and productive cities, for instance. And these 6 interdisciplinary areas, health, cities, climate, water, food and culture, are areas in which Leeds has the size and the capability to make major contributions to global challenges. And it's not just collaboration across campus that we're very good at. We also harness the minds of other academic institutions, but we also have strong and vital partnerships with public, private and third sector partners, and it's great to see some of you here today. So the opening plenary today very much resonates with the work within our cities theme, and indeed Professor Gary Dymski, his chair of the cities theme, will be speaking later. And the purpose of this entire day is to further promote and encourage this interdisciplinary working. Leeds University Business School researchers are going to present their research in the hope that it will spark interest in audience members and hopefully lead to some new and fruitful collaborations. But I'm also delighted that we'll also hear from a number of external colleagues, both academics and corporates, who will help facilitate the discussions around some of the big research questions in the business field. I have to run off. I'm meeting another guest in about 10 minutes across the other side of campus. I really wish I could stay and hear more, but I'm sure I'll hear more about it later from my colleagues. So all that's left for me to say is I hope you enjoy your day, enjoy the Festival of Ideas, hope it's very productive. But now, all I say is have a warm, safe day and a productive day, and I'll hand you back to Professor Tim Deviney, who will introduce your keynote speaker. Thank you.
Okay, what I'd like to do is invite Tom Bridges up Tom is going to give the first keynote. Tom is currently at Arup. He's been there since the beginning of the year as director of the city's advisory, responsible for developing and leading Arup's growing city-focused advisory activities outside London. The role that he has includes advising on city and regional strategies for economic development, inclusive growth, skills, and innovation, and also supporting clients in terms of funding, finance, socioeconomic advice, housing growth, looking at neighborhood renewal, regeneration programs, and other citywide potential strategies. So welcome, Tom, and I'll turn over to you. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for battling through the ceaseless Siberian wind, the beast from the east. And I think many of us who work in cities are also feeling perhaps buffeted by the winds of economic and technological change. It feels like we live in an era of rapid and hugely disruptive change. And I wanted to talk about that change this morning. And what I see are some of the main trends and some of the main forces affecting our cities, focusing particularly on second-tier cities in the UK, such as Leeds. And I'm going to argue that looking forward to what the city of the future needs to be like, we need a new definition of smart cities. I think to now, the smart cities agenda has been one that has been really shaped by clever digital people installing clever digital hardware technology to make our cities more efficient. And I think we need to, in the future, go beyond the what of smart cities in terms of the kit and the capability of that kit to the why. And the Smart Cities agenda needs to be about how all of us can shape the city's agenda, how we can sort of mainstream digital and data in everything we do, be digital by default, if you like, and how we need to focus on the economic and social and environmental outcomes that can be driven by technology and change. So I'm going to be talking about the future, and I'm going to be talking about some of the drivers of change now, but I'm going to start by going back in history to around 140 years from here, because the fact is, whilst we feel the winds of economic and technological change today, our cities have always been responding, growing, innovating and adapting in the face of disruption. So it's 1888, and on Leeds Bridge, a young man from France has come to Leeds and has created the world's first ever moving image. Louis Le Prince moved to Leeds because of the city's capabilities in engineering. He joined the firm Whitley Partners of Hunslet, manufacturers of valves and computers, and he also was involved in what perhaps today would be called the creative industries, in the formation of the Leeds Technical School of Art in 1871. It was a time of great innovation and change. Leeds was kind of the Silicon Valley of its day, and a time of great entrepreneurship. 4 years earlier, a Polish refugee opened a stall in Leeds Kirkgate Market, and in 1894 he went into partnership with a cashier from a local wholesale company. Their names were Michael Marks and Thomas Spencer, and their slogan was, "Don't ask the price, it's a penny." In the 3 previous decades, a new railway station, Leeds Central, was opened, which joined the London North West Railway and the North Eastern Railway, and that would grow to become the busiest transport hub in the north of England. Some of the world's most prestigious and productive workplaces had been created, from Temple Works in Holbeck, the largest room in the world in its time, to Tower Works, to Alf Cook's Prince Works, now home at the main campus of Leeds City College. Investments to improve the productivity, the efficiency of manufacturing businesses, and indeed the welfare and well-being of their workforce, setting new standards in workplace, production, design and technology. In 1874, the Yorkshire College of Science opened with support of local industry, teaching experimental physics, mathematics, geology, chemistry, biology, textiles and engineering. And in 1887, a year before Le Prince's breakthrough in creating the world's first moving image, the college merged with its counterparts in Manchester and Liverpool to form the Victoria University, perhaps a precursor to the N8 collaboration, before gaining its royal charter as the University of Leeds in 1904. The Leeds General Infirmary, which had been established in 1771, moved to its current site on Great George Street in the 1860s. The magnificent building was designed by George Gilbert Scott, who was advised on the design by a nurse and a social reformer by the name of Florence Nightingale. And in 1858, the new Leeds Town Hall was opened by Queen Victoria. A huge crowd gathered at the opening, the largest crowd ever to gather on the streets of Leeds, a record that stood for another 158 years until an even large group of people watched at the same location the start of the 2015 Tour de France, the world's largest annual sporting event. And the building of the Town Hall symbolised the rise in importance of the Leeds Corporation, building on the powers that was granted to it in the 1842 Leeds Improvement Act, powers that current city leaders would give their eye teeth to have to regulate and invest in streets, in lighting, in sewage, building regulations, infrastructure and street cleansing. So why is this history relevant to the issues our cities and this city faces today? Well, think about the trends, think about the forces at that time: rapid technological change, innovation and interconnected industries, huge changes in the economy, new communication systems. The world's first ever trunk telephone line opened between Leeds and Bradford in 1880. The role of education and colleges, the well-being and productivity of the workforce, the formation of universities, businesses investing in skills and premises to boost their productivity. A city that was open to talent and open for business, attracting talent of the likes of Le Prince or of Michael Marks from around the world. A focus on the health and well-being of the population, investment in infrastructure, and new forms of self-confident and powerful city government and leadership. And I think all those issues, I'm sure you'll agree, are very relevant today. And so looking at the drivers of change that are facing our cities today, I believe we're at a similar moment where economic, technological, societal and environmental, and our Victorian predecessors didn't think about the environment that much, changes and forces are coming together and creating huge challenges but also huge opportunities for our cities. And I'm going to talk through those 7 drivers for change briefly now before drawing some conclusions in terms of what it might mean for the future. So I'm going to start with the economy. The economy is changing rapidly, and Leeds, the Leeds economy has always actually had a remarkable capacity to reinvent itself. We were hit quite hard by the recession and crash of 2007-2008, but bounced back very strongly, and that's significantly because of a very proactive approach that was taken by the public sector, particularly Leeds City Council, in pump priming some developments. And the Leeds economy grew strongly between 2010 and 2015. In fact, between 2014 and 15, Leeds had the fastest private sector jobs growth of any UK city. But that growth has stalled since then. Between 2015 and 16, Leeds saw a small decline in private sector jobs. And if you get under the skin of the statistics, it's really interesting to see what happens. Employment in manufacturing continues to reduce. Leeds still has quite a lot of manufacturing, almost 30,000 jobs in the sector. And that's in line with national trends. But interestingly, employment in financial and professional services is also decreasing. And financial and professional services was very much the bedrock of the city's growth and renaissance in the past 2 or 3 decades. But positively, we're seeing very rapid growth in sectors such as low carbon, in professional and scientific, in health and medical technologies, and in the digital and creative industries, what the economist Doug McWilliams has called the flat white economy. And Leeds is performing really strongly in those sectors. And what that says to me is our economy is reinventing itself again, and we're seeing the emergence of new sectors, new roles, and new patterns of living and working. And the geography of innovation is changing. The concept of out-of-town science parks now feels quite outmoded. And the American economist Bruce Katz from the Brookings Institution has talked about the rise of innovation districts in city centres and on the fringes of city centres. This chart shows where the concentrations of jobs in knowledge-intensive business services in Leeds City region, KIBS. And there's been a huge concentration and a huge clustering of those jobs in Leeds City Centre. People are no longer driving to their out-of-town business parks, coming up with ideas and keeping those ideas secret within their buildings. They're coming into city centres increasingly by public transport and by walking and cycling, and they're exchanging their ideas, they're collaborating, they're comparing and competing in what Katz calls the hyper-caffeinated spaces between the buildings. And I think that trend provides a huge opportunity for Leeds. We're also seeing the economy becoming increasingly integrated, and I think no longer should we be thinking about smart specialization. What's the 1 or 2 things we need to be really good at? I think in an era of economic uncertainty and economic change, it pays not to have all your eggs in one basket. Leeds and indeed many of the other major UK cities actually have quite diverse economic structures, and I think that's a good thing. And I think some of the most interesting innovations and some of the new businesses and new industries are forming at the intersections between economic sectors. Things like fintech, digital health, man-use services, Industry 4.0, are where digital, data, manufacturing, financial and professional services, public services are coming together in new ways. And that's why I think the strategy of this university, focusing on 6 cross-cutting grand challenges and research themes, as opposed to a handful of hero products and processes, is exactly the right approach. But we're also seeing major challenges around productivity, particularly in the UK outside London, often known as the productivity puzzle. This trend of flatlining productivity alongside increasing employment. And there's probably not time this morning to have a detailed discussion about why that is, and I know Gary and the university are involved in a major research collaboration to look at the issues here. People have speculated about the reasons why we've had this slowdown in productivity. Is it to do with infrastructure? Is it to do with skills? Is it to do with the efficiency of business sites and premises? Are our firms exporting enough? Are they focusing on research and development enough? Is it a measurement issue? Are productivity gains accruing to a very small number of firms and a very small number of places? Or is it down to, as a recent article in the Financial Times argued, the quality of British management and the fact that British management, a bit like British motorists, think they're more competent than they actually are? I actually think it's probably a combination of all those things, but it's a very significant issue facing all our cities as well as our national economy. And linked to that, we've got growing inequality, and that inequality is exists within cities, certainly within this city, but also between cities, an increasing divide between the mega successful global cities, the Londons, the New Yorks, the San Franciscos and others, but within the UK, the relatively successful core cities, the largest cities outside London, such as Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, and some of the second and third tier towns and cities. And that growing issue of inequality, the fact that not everyone is benefiting from or contributing to economic growth to their full potential, is a real issue. It creates poverty, it creates costs to the public sector, it holds our economic performance back. And economic disengagement is leading to political disengagement. And I believe this is what has led us to Trump and led us to Brexit. And it's a real challenge. And poverty is no longer an issue once it was an issue that was synonymous with unemployment, but increasingly poverty is an issue that faces working people and working households. This chart shows forecast change in the structure of the labour market. And on the left, we see the forecast change, the growth in higher skilled managerial and professional occupations and the high paid occupations. On the right, we see the forecast growth in the lower skilled, low paid elementary, sometimes insecure occupations. But the jobs in the middle are not forecast to increase to the same extent. In fact, in some cases, they will decrease. And in the words of the late Professor Mike Campbell, the rungs on the ladder of career progression for people are moving further apart or being taken away altogether. And so the issue of low pay in Leeds, an economy with about 430 full-time equivalent jobs, around 80,000 roles, not all of them full-time, in fact many of them part-time, insecure 0 hours types jobs, but 80,000 roles pay less than the real living wage as recommended by the Living Wage Foundation of £8.75 an hour. 80,000, and I certainly find that a very sobering statistic. We're also seeing human capital, the skills of our workforce becoming increasingly important for our economic success. There's various research that has shown quite a strong correlation between the proportion of graduates in the workforce, particularly in the private sector workforce, and economic performance and density of economic functions. You could argue, is that a correlation or is it a causation? But I think there is a case that whereas in the 19th and 20th century, the workforce followed the corporation, I think in today's 21st century knowledge economy, increasingly the corporation, business investment will go where there is a skilled and creative and entrepreneurial workforce. And certainly in my previous role working at Leeds City Council, when we were dealing with inward investments, the first question on a potential investor's lips was not, can I get property? What is the infrastructure like? What's the quality of life like? It's, can I get the workforce? What are the skills like? What's your approach to training and development? And that was quite consistent. So I think being able to attract and retain a skilled workforce and their families is really important for cities. But education is also important, and we talk about the north-south divide in the UK, and we talk about a divide in infrastructure spending and connectivity, but we also have a divide in educational attainment. And on every measure, at every age group, right from early years, from preschool level through to graduates and postgraduates, the cities in the north of England are lagging behind their counterparts in London and the South East. And deprived kids in the north are lagging even further behind than their counterparts in London and the South East. And that's why the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, the think tank created by George Osborne, remember him, has, in my opinion, rightly focusing this on this as a major issue. These economic trends and particularly the economic clustering we're seeing is resulting in the concept of agglomeration and with technological change, with the internet, with digital communication, some people said we wouldn't need to be in cities, we wouldn't need to travel, we'd be able to talk to each other by email or video conference. But actually, as the economies become more specialised, knowledge-intensive functions have clustered within cities, and connectivity is important in supporting the density of those functions and the ability of firms to access a skilled workforce from across a wide area, and also the ability of people to move job and sometimes to move to more productive jobs without moving house. And whilst in London and the South East we see, this map shows commuting patterns, a very integrated sort of mega city region of around 20 million people with strong commuter flows, often in two directions. The cities of the North and the Midlands in the UK are close to each other geographically. Leeds to Manchester is 35 miles, same distance as one end of London Central Line to the other. But they're separate functionally. Only less than 1% of the population of Leeds and Manchester commute in the other direction on a daily basis. So connecting our cities up is a big agenda around supporting economic growth and supporting job opportunities for people. We're seeing huge change in urban mobility. I won't dwell on these slides because of time, but Arup have recently published quite an interesting document on the future of urban mobility. But it's fair to say Amazon have already made their first drone delivery. Driverless cars are already being tested on the streets of Coventry and Milton Keynes. HS2 is coming that will transform economic geography, and who knows what in the future. I was on a call yesterday morning about Hyperloop. We're seeing huge technological change that's facing our cities as well. Codified services, where software is replacing what people do and replacing what was done from physical assets. That's affecting jobs, it's affecting things like the high street. We're seeing digitized assets, the use of sensors on everything really, that's enabling us to find new ways of looking at the performance and effectiveness of city infrastructure, but also new ways of creating value. This is what enables Rolls-Royce to no longer sell aerospace engines, but to sell power by the hour. Big data, the huge explosion in data and data analytics, something this university is very strong at, which is creating new insights and new possibilities across a whole range of different sectors. Distributed ledger technologies, blockchain, best known for powering Bitcoin, but also an ability to be transformative across a whole range of different economic activities and public services. Automation and artificial intelligence, which will the robots steal our jobs? And I think this is something that will not just affect manufacturing and low-skilled jobs, will affect many of the financial and professional services jobs, particularly in the back office in places like Leeds. And 5G, new small cell, low latency, very high bandwidth communications technology that could provide the basis for new systems around digital health or driverless cars. Resilience is becoming an increasingly important theme. We're facing more extreme weather as a result of climate change. We're facing threats from terrorism. A city's ability to respond to major civic emergencies is very important. And with increasing volatility in the energy market and the challenge around reducing carbon emissions, a city's ability to be energy independent and to be at the forefront of moving towards a low carbon economy is really important. Health and well-being is also a major challenge, a major societal challenge. The first 120-year-old to live in Leeds is alive today, and it probably is a woman, and she probably lives in North Leeds, is around 65 today, with almost half her life ahead of her. And how we address that challenge of an ageing society and the long-term health conditions people face is really important. And then all of this has implications for city government and the way we govern our cities. So looking to the future, what do we need to do to respond to some of these changes, some of these challenges, some of these fundamental forces that are disrupting the way we live and work and plan and govern our cities? I believe change is inevitable, and cities need to be at the forefront of that change. And smart cities, the smart cities agenda needs to become much broader and needs to be mainstreamed in everything we do. And I'm optimistic about our ability to prosper in this context. So around innovation districts, we can capitalise on this trend of knowledge-intensive jobs coming into city centres to create the science parts of the 21st century around our universities and our regeneration areas, and that's certainly the vision for this part of Leeds. We're in Leeds pioneering the concept of inclusive growth, joining up the previously separate agendas around economic growth and poverty reduction to bring those together to create a new approach that puts people and puts tackling poverty and getting people contributing to the economy to their full potential at the heart of an economic strategy. We need, in my opinion, to focus relentlessly on how we drive up productivity. And I think fundamentally, if we don't tackle that challenge, our ability, particularly in an era of austerity, as cities and as nations, to improve the well-being and improve the prosperity of our people will be impaired fundamentally. I think we can invest in the right residential offer to attract and retain skilled people. This is an image of the proposed scheme at Kirkstall Forge in West Leeds, where a new railway station opened last year. Culture, I think, is important in terms of a city's identity, in terms of its quality of life, in terms of its creativity, and in terms of that ability to attract and retain skilled people. But putting children at the heart of our growth strategy, driving up educational attainment, linking better childcare to better educational outcomes for young people and better employment outcomes for their parents and carers will be important. And rather than trying to determine what technology we need in our cities, I think there's some really interesting work, and it's been pioneered in this city, where we have an excellent Chief Digital Officer at the Council, Dylan Roberts, around the concept of the city as a platform for technological change. We're open for experimentation as long as investors and technology companies adhere to a certain set of standards and have open systems. And we also need to look at new approaches around health and well-being, from digital health to precision medicine to some of the social innovation around tackling loneliness, the neighbourhood networks that now exist in every part of Leeds to support elderly people. So, and we need to be resilient, and we need to be at the forefront of tackling climate change. And all of this has fundamental implications for city government. This is a recent chart from a new local government network publication, and it argues that traditionally city governments were hierarchical organisations. They were controlling, they were silo-based, they were in the bottom left-hand quadrant of the diagram. And in the future, they need to move towards the top. They need to be more agile. They need to be more collaborative. They need to have a positive impact disproportionate to their size by working with and through others in new ways. So to conclude, we started with Louis Le Prince 140 years ago, and we started with an era of huge change and possibility in Leeds. The Leeds economy has, as I said, always demonstrated a remarkable capacity to reinvent itself, as have our city economies more generally. This graph shows how Leeds has made a transition from an economy that was dominated by manufacturing and production at the start of the 20th century, the vertical axis, to a knowledge economy today along the horizontal axis. We face some fundamental forces of change, and I think they are creating threats, they are creating disruption, and they're creating opportunities. But if we're going to grasp those opportunities, if we're going to withstand those threats, I think we need to move to a new definition of smart cities. We need to be at the forefront of that economic change. We need to back our innovators and entrepreneurs. We need to tackle inequality and put that agenda at the heart of our economic strategies. We need to create the spaces for innovation, for more productive growth, not just for consumption. We need to invest in human capital, particularly in our children, and in making our workforce resilient. We don't just need a code club in every school, we need a code club in every workplace. We need to mainstream digital and data in everything we do. We need to be digital by default. We need to be better connected and have a transport system that supports density and places for people, not just for cars. We need to shake off the motorway city of the 70s legacy and become the railway and mass transit system, the city for walking and cycling in the 2020s and 2030s. And I believe we can, through new technology and new innovation, begin to solve the challenges of health, social care, well-being, the crises of loneliness and air quality, where we can create a city that is more resilient to the impacts of climate change and plays its part in tackling climate change. And I think we can have new forms of governance that are agile, collaborative, and creative. Leeds has many attributes, and our cities have many positive attributes, but the competition isn't standing still. And the pace of change today is probably as slow as it will be over the next 100 years. We face unprecedented challenges as well as opportunities, but I believe it's only by replicating the boldness and foresight of our city leaders and reformers and entrepreneurs in the 19th century that we will succeed in the middle and later parts of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to now invite Gary Dymski up. Gary is a professor at the Leeds University Business School, chair in applied economics. He's also the chair of the University Cities team. He's published numerous books, articles, and studies in banking, financial fragility, urban development, credit market discrimination, Latin and Asian studies, particularly in the financial side, housing finance, particularly the subprime lending crisis, and other pieces of work on financial regulation, the Eurozone crisis, and economic policy. So welcome, Gary. Thank you.
So first of all, let me say that there's really no following that speech. It reminds me of why I was so excited to come here after many years in California to find opportunities for change that you wouldn't expect in a climate that's basically changeable 4 or 5 times a day, sometimes for the worse, as today. When I came, and Tim and I came from other places. I was at the University of California for 24 years before coming here. And one thing I always admired about California was the fact that we had the private sector and the public sector working together with the universities in order to create the kind of California miracle. It was clear to everyone in that state that basically the secret of the success of the state was the fact that it was able to generate graduates that would be from the University of California system, from Stanford and Caltech, and to hold them so that they could be the basis of generating technological revolution after revolution. And there was a sense of can-do that was absolutely critical. Now, at the same time, I have to say, as a member of the University of California faculty for many years, one felt that one was a member of a giant army. we have 10 campuses. There's something like 130,000 faculty and so on. It's just a giant institution, and you're just an ant. When I came here in 2012, there was an introductory speech by the then VC Michael Arthur, who said to us that this was the professors, I guess, gathered in the room, to say, where we go is where you lead us. And actually, that turned out to be true. It wasn't that we were members of an army, but there was the expectation that we would basically lead this university. And indeed, that sense of can-do is something that I've seen as well in the third sector here, among the private institutions, and in the Leeds City Council as well. And Tom is giving you a wonderful overview of the vision and kind of just scope and depth and the willingness to take a risk and make things different. My job today is to talk about the way in which the city's themes and platform strategy is going to try to bring us along as part of these changes that Tom is talking about. And really it has to do with the idea of moving from research to transformation. And I'm going to both talk a lot about the city's theme, the theme that I'm part of, and give you an idea and to invite you to join in some sense, and at the same time to give a little bit of an overview of how the strategy is working for the faculty. Now, here's the themes and platforms for the university. And sorry for the slight mismatch there. The themes are on the left and the platforms are on the kind of in the center. There's a little bit of an idea of, the platform is something like a basis for knowledge that can be widely shared. So they say Leeds Social Science Institute. And then the themes are kind of substantive and grand challenges that the university wants to take on. But in designing these things, as Lisa was saying, this is an initiative that came with our new Vice Chancellor. Sir Alan came here and he looked and said, where are we good? Where do we do things? And that in which we can take a lead, and said, let's basically emphasize and encourage interdisciplinary research there. Now, the funny thing about City's theme was that actually there was a kind of tussle, because there were established centers, like water at Leeds is world famous, and their energy research and the medical and health research is cutting edge without a doubt, and as emphasized, say, by the Asbury Center there. But in terms of cities, we had on the one hand some fantastic work going on infrastructure, resilience, and so on, waste recycling, and so on. And then we also had some great work going on ecological transformation, and I would mention there the work of Andy Gouldson, who both invented the idea of the mini Stern review to have local areas basically show local areas how they could finance changes in their infrastructure and their strategies so as to be more climate resilient. And at the same time, Andy's gone on and he's been the entrepreneur in creating the Leeds Climate Commission, along with Leeds City Council's own Tom Noland. So basically, we were thrown together into one theme and told to work it out on the spirit of basically collaborating. And we've welcomed that opportunity. I should say that this university is based on very strong and very proud faculties. Our cost models are based on that. And so in some sense, we were asked to do something different. And in a way, when Tom mentioned that the shift from hierarchy to adhocracy, that was exactly the spirit in which we moved. We weren't given much institutional structure. I'm joined here by my colleague in the city's theme. I should say the other co-leader is Phil Purnell, who can't be with us today. Faye McAnullet, who's our Research and Innovation Development Manager. And we were given, basically the services of Faye to go out and find some creative projects and grants to work with other universities. And I think we also got, I think we made our own logo, and we got a few pencils and a couple of pads of paper and said, go to work. I remember when we had, that we were initially in the supercomputer center up in Worsley, and we were sitting around a table with David Hogg, who was then Vice Chancellor of DVC for Research. And David said, who's financing this? Who's paying for this? in a university in which everything counts that way. And basically, we said, we don't know. He said, I don't either. Let's keep it that way. In other words, there's a real need in today's institutions to count dollars and cents, pounds and cents, but at the same time, there's really a need at the same time to innovate. Okay, let me show you. We've got a lot of projects and that cut across engineering, environment, social science, business, economics. You can see all the fields there. And our idea basically is indeed that we move in a flexible way with a team that's capable, teams I should say, our team in cities and other teams of research and impact managers who help us to formulate projects and put them together, often in collaboration with partners in the private sector and third sector, and in addition, in the city as well, and in addition, across faculties. Here is our list of our key research areas. Okay, so basically, looking at cities very broadly, think of Tom's speech and look at this list, and I'll give you a couple others as well. So resilient infrastructure, green cities, livability, which includes the key word inclusive and fair. Our concern with inequality and poverty is right there in the center. Smart, connected, and data-driven, and concerns with financialization. Now, there's our list. Here's a list from EuroCities, which is a network of cities to which Leeds belongs, that basically cities thinking together in an era of devolution and region-led growth that's becoming a real theme in all of Europe, including the UK. And you can see that basically it's a very similar and parallel list without walking you through all of it. And if I can then give you a page that's much more colorful and fun, these are the challenges of the city of Leeds. Here you go. The best council plan, which has lots of, it looks just like a field of flowers, but the themes here basically hit pretty much every one of Tom's themes. They hit our themes, and there's idea of co-thinking and working together that's key in all of this. Now, what we then expect are basically that we want to connect people up to have smarter communities, sustainable food, all of these things. And you can see that the way to work is, again, picking up a theme that Bridges gave us, that we need to work across the boundaries. And this is something that, we like to call it, system of systems approach. That what Leeds is especially good at, we have a lot of people in civil engineering, in environment, and other fields, and my two names I mentioned, Phil Purnell and Andy Gouldson, are examples of people who are able to take technological innovations and to think across boundaries of how to make things work together. And it turns out actually that we're not alone in this, but we have partners in universities like Birmingham, UCL, Southampton, Newcastle, and so on, that join with us. So there's this kind of back and forth between inventors of technology and then people who are able to think about how those technologies and how those new ideas can work together in transforming human systems. And so just going to walk you through some of the projects we've got. Some of them are aimed at, in a sense, a national level. One is called iBuild, and basically, this is a project that is aimed in, again, working with partners, EPSRC funded. That's where Lisa Roberts went to go talk to the director of EPSRC, who's here today. Essentially, iBuild has to do with rethinking the definition of value that's used in creating infrastructure projects. The basic logic is that if you can think with a more patient and longer term time horizon, more things become fundable. If you start to plan for the long term as opposed to the short, it transforms what you can do. In fact, this topic came up yesterday in Leeds Town Hall, where there was a gathering of people who were talking, among other things, about the need to have more long-term thinking in our nation. Another couple of projects have to do with waste recycling, the idea of more circular cities, in part by paying attention to the kind of, processes of waste and water and other things to move in that direction. So this goes along with the green agenda. And if you live here, you know that there's been many, many innovations already in this area. There's been a giant project on financialization that looked at the impacts of financialization on our society. And I think the one that's going on now, led by Rob Richardson and Raul Fuentes, is called Self-Healing Cities. It has to do, and we're working in conjunction with Leeds City Council, it has to do with basically using drones and AI and robotics technology in order, over a 10-year lifespan, to figure out how to basically have a self-healing city. The technology is the white blood cells of the city. And I should say that, interesting point about this is that the engineers, so I'm part of the team, and I'm on the economic and social impact side. But as the team plans, the main focus that we have is on reproducible and open technologies. The way the engineers like to say it is that any idiot, we were talking about crack detection, and so when is asphalt cracked or when is something else cracked and what do you need to do about it? And the way it was said in our recent meeting was, any idiot can think of how to identify cracks very accurately with a $250,000 machine. What takes work, though, is to figure out how to find a way to take a couple of off-the-shelf drones, put those together with some very affordable devices, and basically make that happen. And so essentially, we're aiming at technology not that's beautiful and expensive and inaccessible, but that can be widely shared and can be a standard that can be used across towns and cities, not just shared in the elite places. Then we've got, the robotics. This is just a little bit more. I think just shows you these are some of the actual physical challenges that our robotics experts in the Self-Healing Cities project are doing. And just to say there's that. And Self-Repairing Cities is an interesting project if you want to check it out. We actually, in conjunction with other universities, were able to win a national grand challenge to do that. In addition, we have more local projects, and one of them that's really exciting is about co-production and the use of co-production as a means for transforming and enhancing the capacity for local governance. Tom mentioned governance as a key consideration, and I completely agree. In fact, in the overall work on the productivity challenge that I've been involved with, or I'm getting involved with, governance in organizations is a key factor. So we had a project here in Lee where we experimented with bringing people together to create solutions together as members of a shared community. Just to say, we've got a lot of stuff going on climate change. Here, I would just note that, in a sense, the interesting aspect of the way the work goes is that Climate Smart Cities is a project that goes globally, again, led by Gouldson and others, and Faye's played a key role in some of that research. And at the same time, there's been that second bullet point. The Leeds Committee on Climate Change is a local initiative in which people are being called upon, again, in a spirit of co-production shared with technological innovation, to find ways to make our city more climate resilient. And I'll just to say that there's other things there. Let me just go to say that we're working globally as well. Here's just a quick listing of some of the projects that we have. Those range from socially inclusive cities, which goes to issues of inequality and ethnic, let's say, tension and cooperation, how to overcome some of our problems. The Triangle City project is one in which we're looking at the shared resource of a key river that's got serious pollution problems, split amongst 3 countries in South America, and how to allow, how those countries can work together to resolve their common problems of cleaning up the rivers and so on. And so that's something that's going on. I want to mention here a project by Gary Graham of the Business School, who's been focused on the reemergence of productivity through manufacturing, maker spaces, and indeed the transformation of manufacturing. I'm out of time, and so I'll just show you one final thing here, that as an example of the way we're working, there's a driving lab, simulation lab, down in the lower part of campus that was just that. It's being re-envisioned as a virtuosity lab in which basically the idea is to focus on city simulation. and in which indeed we're involving the School of Psychology because we're understanding that virtual reality approaches can both be helpful in finding health and medical solutions and at the same time are linked into the overall logic of creating new ways for us to have more reasonable and more connected transportation, both virtual and real. Thanks for your attention, and I will join the panel.
What I'd like to do is invite our panel members up here. We have three panel members. Louise Ellis. Louise is the Director of Sustainability at the university. She was a lecturer in the School of Earth and Environment, and she was the program manager for the MSc in Sustainability Consulting. Before she came to Leeds, she worked for a number of consulting companies, including Deloitte's. The second panel member is Martin Farrington, who's the Director of City Development. He's responsible for economic growth of the city, including regeneration work, support for businesses, jobs, and skills. He's also responsible for planning, highways, potholes, and street lighting, so you can aim your complaints in his direction, I guess. Museums, galleries, stately homes, if you want one, and sports and leisure centers. And finally, Prue Lumley is a property partner at the Leeds office of the real estate group at Squire Patton Boggs. And also must say at this point that they are one of our supporters for this event, so we were very happy for her to be here. She's had more than 15 years as a commercial property lawyer, and also the chair of the board of the Leeds Business Improvement District, a business-led not-for-profit organization that's aimed at transforming Leeds City Center. We gave them one simple question, or not a simple question, one very complicated question, which seems simple, I guess, at the front end, and that is, how do we make our cities a better place to live and work? We've asked each of them to sort of kind of give a bit of a commentary on this, but also potentially to comment on the speeches that they heard. So I will turn over first to Louise, then to Martin, and then to Prue in that order. So if you could begin, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, thank you for battling the snow to get here. So reflecting both on the speeches that I've heard this morning, but also on the question that was kind of posed to us as panel members, the first thing is I'm really pleased that you've kind of got the exam question aligned with the speeches, so that's always a good start. So for me, I kind of started to think about what would the vision look like before the kind of how we get there. Because I think it's important that we do kind of vision forward. We don't just focus on where we are right now. Otherwise, we're not really going to create the change that we need to create to really achieve smart, sustainable cities. And I was so pleased that Tom kind of introduced the idea of widening out the idea of smart cities. And for me, the key to that is having cities that are equal and diverse. I think if we don't have that, then we really struggle to achieve all the other things. And by that, I mean, having an equality of opportunities, and that's both in terms of health, education, but also access to economic development. And the three of those elements go hand in hand. But also equality of the environment. So it's important that all our development, both technical and physical, really enhances the environment in which we live. By doing that, we enhance the well-being and the health of the societies that live in those cities. And it's really important that we don't disconnect those elements from each other. Reflecting on how long it's taken me to get to the Great Hall this morning, connectivity is really important. And by that I mean both in terms of our physical infrastructure, so travel is usually important. For me as an individual and as a professional, sustainable travel is key to any healthy city. So having travel that is affordable, that is accessible to all, that is efficient and is environmentally sound is actually really key. And I think it's key in attracting new different technologies, new societies, new industries to a city. But also the connectivity between people. So allowing communications, allowing communities to work together, allowing different organisations in a city to work together is also just as key. I also think it's really important that we have cities that allow organisations and individuals to be agile and flexible. The world is changing quicker than most of our organisations. Again, in my professional role in an organisation that's been here more than 100 years, agility is not always something that is easy, but is always actually quite key. And it's really important that we have cities that are resilient and adaptable. So we have to be resilient to extreme weathers, but we have to be able to adapt to the changing climate at the same time. It's important that the key to all this is well-being. So the well-being of our societies and environment, again, is absolutely key to economic growth. So how do we get there? Well, I think it's really important, picking up on something that Gary said, that we see our systems, our cities as systems. We can't disconnect all of these elements from each other, but we also see individuals as part of that system. So when we're making decisions, when we're making changes, how does that affect the different parts of our community, the different parts of our society? That's the only way that we're going to get to a much more equal society. It's also important that we don't see cities as individual elements, that we are part of a national and global infrastructure. We are part of a global ecosystem. I think it's really important that we make bold decisions. So as a city, Leeds particularly right now, but also other cities make bold decisions, and that we're not scared to do that. And to do that, we create innovation together. The co-creation of innovative solutions is really important. But to address the disruptive issues that Tom has talked about, we need disruptive solutions too, solutions that are different to what we've had before. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we link the Internet of Things to the Internet of people and the environment, again, seeing it as a city, because some of the innovations that are coming out of the Internet of Things are so good and are changing the way that we understand how people work as well as systems, that we should really carry that on into real and innovative thinking. And I think beyond anything for me, it's about creating cities that are equal and diverse and that people are proud to be in. If people are proud to be in a city, they will be more productive and there will be much more economic investment within them.
Thank you. I was listening very carefully to both Gary and Tom, and I was mindful that Tom took a historic perspective from the start, and Gary talked about the need to take a long-term view on investment, and that echoed my thoughts on this subject matter, and particularly with regard to cities and looking at how cities develop in the future. I do think it's important to take a long-term view of how they've developed to get to us where we are and over the past. And moving outside of Leeds, and I think Liverpool is a very good example of a city that in 1931 it had a population of more than 800,000 people, and by 1981 that had declined to just over 400,000 people, and it had gone through a very significant period of post-industrial decline and was a dying city. And it has worked very hard in terms of redevelopment and regeneration to achieve that growth again. And I think that's probably the most clear example in the UK, but you can see that in Leeds, although Leeds, as historically its mercantile base, has been more resilient. But what you then see is a picture that is common across many cities, and particularly in the UK, where you get concentrations of economic activities in the city centre and the areas where the highest earners work and spend their days. And then outside of that, those areas of deprivation where the highest incidence of deprivation currently occur. And that exists in Leeds today, as it does in many cities, and it's a real challenge as to how that is addressed. And you can see, as Leeds has developed as an industrial city, post-industrial decline, as Tom mentioned, reinvented itself as a city of financial and professional services, and then in a post-credit crunch world in terms of digital and knowledge-intensive activity, you can see how Leeds is reinventing itself. But it's how you address that challenge of the rim of a city centre that I think is a big one to look to tackle. And from my perspective, giving a practical example on that, for many years I've been looking at Leeds Dock, was Clarence Dock, as a new development that completed around 2007, but it struggled to really take hold and be vibrant as a development. And it took me some time to realise that I was looking at Leeds Dock from the wrong perspective. I was looking at it from my office in the city centre. And when I went down to Leeds Dock, half a mile beyond was Hunslet Mill. Hunslet Mill, Grade 2 star listed collection of derelict Victorian mills, a legacy of Leeds industrial strength, been vacant for 4 decades, crumbling in a state of dereliction. And myself and my team, we worked very hard with the developer to bring them back into productive use. And in a couple of months' time, the first residents will be moving in. And that made me realise, well, actually, the vibrancy of Leeds Dock is from the other end of the telescope, and it's looking at it from that rim and how you regenerate that rim and connect it forward from there. And the work that we've done is to bring Hunslet Mill back into productive use, this legacy of industrial grandeur in the city. We have worked very hard with a developer called Situ, who are bringing forward passive housing just on the other side of the river. And that's houses, not just flats, so it attracts a broader demographic. We're working with them to bring the footbridge across, which creates pedestrian linkage to Leeds Dock. But it also provides the conduit for our district heating scheme to come across into the South Bank and that large area of growth. And then we're working with Situ on the development of a primary school, which will be complementary to the University Technical College and the Ruth Gorse Academy as secondary accommodation, which has already come forward. And what we're doing there, picking up on Tom's point in terms of how local authorities can be facilitators and be agile in terms of bringing all of these elements together, is changing an area of the city centre that has been post-industrial and needing regeneration, and creating it into a new sustainable part of the city centre that is creating vitality for a development on the city centre that was in clear need of it. And I think that, to me, is the way forward in terms of how cities need to work collaboratively across a range of sectors, pulling in and acting as agents for pulling in all the arms of government to facilitate solutions which are multifaceted to deliver the growth and the opportunities that cities need.
Hi. For those of you who aren't familiar with the concept of a business improvement district, just very briefly, it's a not-for-profit organisation which collects a levy from businesses within a fixed area and then returns that levy by way of improvements to the area to try and drive improvements and growth within the city area. The Leeds Business Improvement District, it was started about 2.5 years ago, and our entire focus is around Leeds City Centre, sort of with the University District at the top, down to the water, and with the new West End developments at MEPC, and all the way through to the cultural quarter of the West Yorkshire Playhouse. We raise about £2.5 million a year, and we reinvest that on trying to really drive this prosperity and the feel and the growth of the city of Leeds, which benefits our levy payers. And what's become really apparent, actually, over the 2.5 years that we've been running is one of the key words is all to do with is experience. If we want to have a thriving and prosperous and forward-thinking city, we need the experience of being in Leeds to be world-class. And that has benefits on a number of areas. So as a business, if your clients are arriving or your customers are arriving in Leeds, we've got to have the good station, we've got to have the good connectivity, we've got to have clean streets. So the bid, for example, are funding the rangers who are cleaning the streets above and beyond the level that the City Council already do to try and clean up the carpet of the city. We've got ambassadors there who greet you at the station or will show you where to go. They're the guys in the bowler hats you'll have seen wandering around, who will also just keep an eye on the way that the city is functioning, report any issues to the bid and to the council. We want students to stay in Leeds. We want people, we've got a fantastic university system. We want the students to stay because the graduates who come through, you know, we've got amazing technology businesses who need great students. We've got a real dearth of skill sets in areas. So we want the students and the people who live in the heart of Leeds to appreciate it. So we do events, we have improved the Christmas scenario so that we do extra lighting projections. We've supported Light Night, we've brought the Mobos to Leeds. It's around creating that buzz and that feel within Leeds, that it is a busy, prosperous and thriving city, and the experience of being in the city is absolutely critical. We're looking at public realm improvements because we want people to come to Leeds, we want people to stay in Leeds, and we want them to, when they leave, to talk about what a great city it is. Family friendly is something that Tom mentioned. You know, it's really, really important that people feel that they can come into a safe city, that they can feel that it is part of their life as a part of their family. We've got purple flag status that we work with the council on to provide a safe environment, a safe city, night ambassadors where people can, and night marshals putting people into taxis in an evening, make sure that, you know, we've got a very vibrant evening economy, but we want to make sure that that is a safe environment for everybody, not just the people who are wanting to sort of go to the bars and clubs. And it is constantly, the buzzword is experience, and I think a city for the future is one that can deliver a good experience for people, not just to work in, but to live in, to visit, to shop in, to experience every single day of their lives. And that's what the Business Improvement District is very lucky that we're pretty nimble. We can do quick projects that we're somewhere sort of between the future and the past that Tom sort of talked about. We're about delivering now. We have to pass a ballot every 5 years to be supported. So we're about delivering projects now to make the city more attractive, more commercially successful, and a place that people want to live and work in.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I think that there are a number of really kind of interesting ideas which have sort of floated around from this discussion. You know, particularly Prue's point at the end. As a friend of mine once said, I don't live in the past and I don't live in the future. I'm concerned about what I'm doing now. And I think the other aspect which has also come out of a lot of the discussion is the relationship between the different communities in the city environment. You know, that there's kind of two ways to think about this. One way to think about this is how do people relate to others in their own communities, and then how do those communities relate to other communities elsewhere, either locally and then within, within the world. Because the environment in which we find ourselves, anybody who has studied like I have, and many of my colleagues in the area in which I am in the business school, is related to international business, knows that the days in which nations compete against nations has kind of disappeared and given way to where cities and regions compete against one another, and the ecosystems that they create are not compared to the environments of cities just around them, but cities globally, particularly in a war for talent. What I'd like to do, just as a way of sort of kind of closing it, is to just see if there are any questions that would come from the audience. And rather than asking the panel to respond individually, you know, just state your question, state who you are, state your question, and then the panel can close by sort of picking and choosing what of those questions that they might want to address as a way of sort of summarizing the first session in the morning. So are there any questions? Yes, in the back. We don't have a roving mic, do we? No. So you're going to have to talk very loud. Could you stand up?
Yes. I'm the lecturer I'm lecturer at Financial Business at the Business School. I'm just surprised there's no mentioning of Brexit. And I know when you talk about you mentioned the challenges in the disrupted era of stability. But I heard a lot about global disruption rather than about the regional disruption now we are facing. I'm aware of the challenges, but I would love to hear something about the opportunities. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Yep. Tyra, next person. Take the mic, please.
Hi. Oh, you got a mic. Hello? Oh. You could hear me anyway. Two quick questions. So the first one, well, one quick question. The first one is, what's a dumb city? And also, the second one is essentially, as you actually invest in more and more digital assets within the city, I've hardly heard anyone talk about cybersecurity and those sorts of issues. I'm learning Python 3, and I can probably develop a code to really stuff up a small firm now, a small business now. So I haven't heard anything talked about this sort of cybersecurity issues.
Okay. One last question? Yeah, Jocelyn. You can get the Tyrone, bring the mic over.
Jocelyn Dennett. I'm a management consultant. I work with sort of leadership teams in large companies. Specifically was interested in Gary's point that there are many projects that, investment projects, become viable when you look over the longer term. What I'd be interested in, what are your thoughts on the potential financing options for that longer term thinking?
Okay. Now we'll turn over. We'll go in the order we've got here. So we'll start with Tom and then Gary and... Sure.
Okay. I'll take the Brexit question. Opportunities that might come from Brexit. Well, I suppose what's the evidence around the potential economic impact of Brexit on cities? I think the research that has been done, and there hasn't been a lot, shows there will be a negative forecast. There's the research by Centre for Cities and the Centre for Economic Performance at LSE came up with a series of forecasts of how different cities are predicted to fare, and the bad news is Leeds is predicted to fare as one of the worst because we're seen to be heavily exposed to the potential shocks in knowledge-intensive business services and financial services, and I think I think sort of things like WTO rules sort of might work and tariffs might work for goods, but actually for services what they require is regulatory alignment and convergence and common international standards. So I think cities that are heavily invested in those sectors are probably more at risk in the short term, but perhaps over the longer term might have the capacity to respond to the new world that might be created in Brexit. The forecast, depending on whether it's a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit, are that Leeds would have a sort of 1.6 to 2.6 drop in economic output. But what I would say is actually our ability to increase productivity will have a bigger impact than what might or might not happen with Brexit. So whilst I think it's right we think about Brexit, I hope that the challenges and the changes that will come with it will lead to an unrelenting focus on productivity and particular aspects around productivity, such as exports. So Leeds as an economy doesn't export a huge amount. About half our exports are to the EU and half elsewhere, and firms that export tend to be more productive, and particularly around skills and investment in workforce skills. I think it will be harder for firms to import low-skilled, low-paid labour. We'll need a real focus on higher-level skills and elementary-level skills and training if we're to respond to Brexit. So whilst personally I don't see a huge number of positives, I think cities need to have a plan, and it needs to be a plan that is going to be, Leeds has a 5-point plan to deal with Brexit, and that's very much about being proactive, keeping development moving, maintaining a positive and outward-looking image of the city, whilst the world view of the UK might be of Little England. I think cities need to project a positive, international, diverse, progressive image and message to the world. And I think it was very positive that the leader of Leeds City Council last Monday actually went to meet Michel Barnier with other city leaders, because Leeds has probably more in common with cities such as Lille than it does with cities such as cities such as, or places such as Mansfield, for instance. And I think cities need to think of themselves and be more confident in, on the global stage.
Yeah. Okay, Gary?
Yeah, thanks.
Just quickly, close
Yeah, thanks. I'll take the long-term question because it pointed my way. Let me build from where we are to some more futuristic needs that we have. One is, actually this idea that Tom, the theme he had of what is a smart city, and it goes to, in a sense, what we learn from Louise. Do we start with the people or technology? We've got to start with the people. In the robotics project, the self-healing cities I mentioned, that I'm working with the partners, we are working basically to figure, it's not just a question of redeploying city workers who might have been working, earth-moving machines and what they can do now that we're going to have robots taking care of things. We're focusing on where the families live, where do the kids go to school, what is the pathway to success for families that have been kind of classic, working class, stable jobs that are now threatened. And in particular for this project, we're coordinating with Shahid Mahmood and his team at Leeds City Council. They've been working in 6 lower income areas with challenges of social inclusion, and to work with people there about what their visions are for investment for their children, for education, and so on. If I could take it up a level then, when I came here, John Hillard, who was many years at the business school, economist, remembered a time when he came to the University of Leeds in early 1970s when about a third of the students here were local. Now that's changed, and partly we've got wonderful standards now, and we can attract people from all over the UK and all over the world. That's great, but I think part of it would be to raise the capacity of the schools, and so the kids from here can qualify and participate in some of the pleasures of being in this amazing place and being in the hub of creativity. And finally, I would say in terms of the long run, we've really got to change the way we're thinking. As Tom mentioned, I'm part of a national rethinking of productivity. And productivity, right? Output over labor. How about well-being over not just waged labor, but all labor, including household labor? Let's look at the purple economy. Let's look at the Women's Budget Project. Let's look in a very futuristic way. We're going to have to redefine value and distribution for the entire economy over the longer run. And we have to keep this in mind as we work with our local solutions. So there's many, many challenges. And for those researchers here who are interested, I invite you to get in touch with myself and Faye and join us in the city's theme, and let's invent the future.
Okay, Louise?
So in the spirit of time, just very quickly, the only opportunity I see out of Brexit is the opportunity to deal with the issues that it's absolutely flagged up and raised. It no longer lets us bubble along and ignore some of the real issues that are within our cities and society.
That was quick. I'll try and I'll have a go at your cybersecurity. It's not my area, but the reason why I'll just touch on it is a couple of years ago I got the task of doing a pitch to some investors at 10 Downing Street, and I was given 3 minutes, and I was asked to talk about a data centre, and I knew nothing about data centres, and I was trying to draw out of Dr. Adam Beaumont what this was all about, and I like to speak very plainly and simply, and there was a challenge between us in that he had great depth of understanding and talked in a language that I didn't understand. But what I got from it in the end was effectively the UK internet infrastructure network goes back to 3 source points which are not dependent on the rest of the network. 2 of them are in London, and the third is hosted in Salem Chapel in Leeds. And what that means from a resilience piece in terms of cybersecurity is that if you wanted a resilience strategy that was not dependent on London and independent, you only have one option, which was in Leeds, which was about that data centre. And so when you talk about in the financial sector, And if there is a loss of trading and you want a real-time mirror, should that happen, then you can do that through that data centre in Leeds. So I think it's about the unique attributes of the city that that can then lead to how it can enhance cybersecurity moving forward. And the gentleman that asked the Brexit question has just walked in. So I'll try and give a positive slant, and I am mindful that I'm sitting next to one of the city's top lawyers. But if you look at the legal sector in Leeds, DLA, Yorkshire firm, 120 offices worldwide. If you speak to them, their busiest office in the world is London. Their third busiest is New York. Sorry, second busiest is New York. And just behind that is Leeds. And English law is an export commodity. Law firms in Leeds are not just doing Yorkshire business, they're operating on a global scale. So you take Squire Patton Boggs, that's an American firm. If you look at Bond Dickinson, they just become Womble Bond Dickinson, is it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's an American
Nearly
partnership. So you can see an opportunity. Now, whether it's realised or not, I think the jury's out. You can see an opportunity where legal practices in Leeds offering full services at £30 a square foot office rate, whereas in London it's £90 a square foot, dealing in English law, operating on a world platform with a legal structure that is seen as an export commodity, there is an opportunity there.
Yeah. Okay. Brew?
Just stolen my thunder there, Martin.
Sorry.
No, I mean, Martin's absolutely right that as a law firm, we see lots of opportunities. There are challenges, there are some threats around, as a real estate lawyer, what's going to be happening to people investing in property in the UK, etc., London market. But generally, we see it as an opportunity to sell our services. We don't look European-wise, we are a global law firm. There's an increasing number of law firms that are global, and we can do work in Leeds for anybody all over the world, and we can resource it all over the world. So that's a great opportunity. Just picking up on the infrastructure point and the sort of way we plan for infrastructure, I think it's really important that, for great cities to do well, we need big projects. And big projects are very expensive, and councils do not have the money that they once had. PFI has come and gone and waxed and waned, and there are a number of opportunities that can be taken, but it is about planning now for what we want to do over the next 20, 30 years to be able to fund that. And one of those things that's been talked about recently a lot is value capture, so working with stakeholders in the city who might benefit from infrastructure projects, so if you work with them now, if you engage with them now, they can see what the gain will be if they work with delivery of the infrastructure. You've got bold situations like Paradise Circus in Birmingham, where they basically effectively remodeled the station purely based around a retail model. But that was led by the council. They took it out there, they took the risk, they went there, and then they backed it into Hammerston to do it. So there are some really good opportunities and interesting ways. We've got TIF financing, things like that. There's all sorts of models, but it does require a lot of planning very early on, because otherwise what happens is you kind of go, we want to do this thing, where are we going to get the money from? So if you plan in advance, then you can do that.
Okay. All right. With that, I'd like to close the first session, so please join me in thanking the speakers and the panelists.